Welcome to the Explainer. You ever have one of those questions that just sticks in your head and you really want to know the answer? Well, today we're going to break down the toolkit for turning any simple question into a powerful, testable idea. It's basically a blueprint that researchers use to make sense of the world. And trust me, it's a skill you can use for pretty much anything.
So, let's start with a question I'm willing to bet we've all asked ourselves, probably on a Monday morning. Does that cup of coffee really make you more productive? We're going to use this super simple, everyday idea to build our blueprint for thinking like a researcher.
You see, to get from a hunch to a real finding, we can't just go with our gut. We need something called a theoretical framework. Now I know, that sounds all academic and fancy, but it's really just a blueprint for our idea. It's how we map everything out.
Think of it like a recipe. A good recipe doesn't just list the ingredients, right? It tells you how they all work together to make the final dish. That's all a theoretical framework is. It's our logical map showing how we believe the concepts or variables are connected.
And building this blueprint pretty much always comes down to these 3 steps. First, you've got to define your key players, the variables. Then, you draw a little map showing how you think they're connected. And finally, you explain the why behind those connections. So, let's kick it off with step 1.
Every good research story has a cast of characters, right? Well, in science, we call these characters variables. And they're called that simply because they're things that can change or vary. There are 4 main types we really need to get to know.
First up, we have the star of the show, the dependent variable. This is the main event, the big outcome we're trying to explain or predict. It's the central mystery we're trying to solve.
So for our coffee question, it's pretty clear. The dependent variable is productivity. We want to know what makes it go up, what makes it go down. That's the effect we're focused on. Okay, next up is the independent variable. This is the character we think is pulling the strings. It's the one we believe is causing the change in our star player, the dependent variable. It's the presumed cause in our little story.
And in our investigation, the independent variable is, you guessed it, coffee consumption. Our basic theory is that the amount of coffee we drink directly influences how productive we are. Simple enough, right?
But life is rarely that simple. And this is where things get really interesting, with the moderating variable. This is a game changer. It's a third factor that can change the strength of that main relationship. This is the classic "it depends on" variable. And honestly, this is where you go from simple observation to some really deep insight.
Think about it. The effect of coffee might depend entirely on how much sleep you got last night. If you're well rested, maybe coffee gives you a tiny little boost. But if you're sleep deprived, that same coffee could have a massive impact. In this case, sleep is our moderator. It changes the whole dynamic.
And for our last key player, we have the mediating variable. Now this one is different. It doesn't change the strength of the relationship, it explains the process. It's the bridge that connects the cause to the effect. It answers the super important question, how does this whole thing actually work?
So let's apply it. Coffee doesn't just magically create productivity out of thin air. Our theory is that coffee increases our alertness, and it's that increased alertness that then leads to us being more productive. See? Alertness is the mechanism. It's the mediator. It explains the how.
Okay, so we've met our cast of characters. We have our dependent, independent, moderating, and mediating variables. Now let's put it all together and build our visual blueprint, what researchers call a conceptual model.
So, we start with the simplest piece of the puzzle, our core relationship. We believe coffee consumption leads to a change in productivity, an arrow from one to the other. Easy. Next, we add our mediator to show the actual process. So, coffee leads to increased alertness, and that leads to higher productivity. We're not just saying A leads to C anymore, we're saying A leads to B, which then leads to C. It shows the whole chain of events.
And for the final touch, we add the context. We add our moderator. So sleep quality comes in and affects the strength of that first link between coffee and alertness. And just like that, what started as a simple hunch is now a complete, logical, and totally testable model.
So, let's just make sure we nail this down, because it's really the key. A moderator tells you when a relationship is stronger or weaker. Think of it as the dimmer switch on a light. But a mediator tells you how or why the relationship exists at all. It's the wiring in the wall that explains how flipping the switch turns the light on in the first place. One is about strength, the other is about process.
Okay, our blueprint is drawn, we have our map, now we can finally move from this conceptual model to a clear, testable prediction.
And that, my friends, is called a hypothesis.
A hypothesis is really just our model translated into a simple statement that we can go out and test with real data. It's our official prediction about what we think we're going to find.
And we can frame this prediction in two main ways. If we're pretty confident based on past research, we can make what's called a directional hypothesis, like more coffee leads to higher productivity. But if we're exploring something new, we might use a non-directional one. Basically just saying, hey, we think these two things are related, but we're not sure how yet.
Okay, we built the blueprint, we defined our variables, we even made a hypothesis. So, why does any of this matter if you're not a professional researcher? Well, it turns out that learning to think this way is kind of like a secret superpower in the real world.
Because this way of thinking forces you to go way beyond a simple hunch. When you start identifying the key variables, the causes, the effects, and especially those sneaky moderators and mediators, you just start making smarter decisions. You can look at a news headline and think, okay, but what's the "it depends on" factor here? You start seeing the hidden mechanisms everywhere. It's a framework for breaking down any complex problem and really understanding not just what's happening, but why.
So, the next time you've got a question bouncing around your head, doesn't matter if it's about business or your workout or why your plants keep dying, try building a blueprint. Map out the variables, think about the connections, and just see how a simple hunch can turn into a powerful insight. So, what are you going to investigate next?